Okay, welcome everyone to the Williston Development Review Board for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. I'm Pete Kelly, Chair of the DRB. Welcome to the applicants and welcome to the public participants. Please sign in by renaming yourself on the participant toolbar or commenting on the chat. This is a hybrid meeting taking place at the Town Hall meeting room and virtually on Zoom. All members of the board and the public can communicate in real time. Planning staff will provide Zoom instructions for public participation before the hearings are opened. All votes taken in this meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. If Zoom crashes, this meeting will be continued to January 25th. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance of all DRB members participating in this meeting. Paul Christensen.
Present.
John Hemmelgarn.
Here.
Scott Riley.
Here.
Dave Saladino.
Here.
Dave Turner.
Here.
And Pete Kelly, Chair, is myself. I am present. So that is 6 participants from the DRB. We need 4 for a motion to pass, as there is 1 DRB seat unfilled at this time. So simple majority is 4. Tonight, well, before we go into the agenda, the staff want to walk us through Zoom instructions, please.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to those of you on Zoom. That's everyone. Please do take a moment to sign in and name yourself clearly. You can do that using the participants icon on the toolbar along the bottom of the Zoom screen and hovering over your name in the right-hand panel, clicking rename and then typing your own name in. Or you can send me a message in the chat and we'll rename it. For those of you on Zoom, we do have a range of options for you on the Zoom toolbar, which is on the bottom of the screen. We have the mute button that allows you to turn your microphone on and off. Please do keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. We have the stop and start video button. Video is optional. We have the chat button, which you can use to message me if you need technical help. Public testimony should be submitted verbally. We also have the reactions button. In there are various reactions, one of which is the raise hand button, which you can also use to signal that you'd like to speak. And I think we do have a telephone participant on the line. So you can use the *9 buttons to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute. We'll be using screen sharing this evening so that everyone can see the same documents. Once we start sharing, it should default to side-by-side mode for you, which is the viewing mode we recommend. But if it doesn't, you can access it by clicking the view options at the top of the screen and then clicking side-by-side mode. And that allows you to also click and drag the vertical slider that you can see there to adjust the size of the camera and your shared screen. And then lastly, if you are having a bad internet connection, you can try several things. You can turn off your own video. You can close other browser tabs, computer programs and phone apps. Or you can try using the telephone, your telephone, as a speaker and microphone. And you do this by clicking the up arrow next to the mute button, clicking the leave computer audio, and then dialing back into the Zoom meeting.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Speaking of bad connections on that last screen, you were very difficult to hear. Is staff near the microphone?
that
Okay,
better?
that is better. That was worth that very unpleasant sound.
I am so sorry.
It's
I was
okay.
gonna say, Pete, that you asked for that.
I think I got what I asked for.
That's what
Okay,
happens when you move the owl.
the owl was moved. Okay, we've got 5 items on the agenda tonight. We've got a public forum. We've got the public hearing with 2 applications. We have communications, final plans and other business as item number 3. Then the minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on December 14th, is item number 4, and then adjournment is item number 5. So first order of business is the public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone participating in this meeting, either in person or by Zoom, who would like to raise a topic that is not on tonight's agenda. If you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand and Emily or Simon will call on you.
We're seeing no chats and no raised hands. I would ask for one change to the DRB agenda tonight. Keith Phelan is here. His item is going to be fairly brief and it's last on the agenda. So my recommendation would be to bump it up to the beginning.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, so let's segue into the, let's segue right into that. Let's go slightly out of order. We're going to go into agenda item number 3 briefly before we return to the items listed on agenda items number 2. So this has to do with 1505 Old Stage Road. And members of the DRB, if you would please go to your packet and take a look at the plan that was submitted. Great. Thank you. Simon, appreciate it. So this was a plan that was submitted. If you recall, this is the property that we've asked for additional screening to be done. And this was a plan that was submitted, and I'd like to hear from the applicant. Well, first of all, who is here representing the applicant? And please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, sorry, I was blocked there. Keith Phelan, homeowner.
Thank you, Keith. And your address, please.
Oh, 1505 Old Stage Road.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so please explain what you submitted to us, please.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a 2-scale drawing of the entire road frontage and the first 50 feet of the property. That is the landscape buffer. So the items, this was done by a professional landscaper. Her name's Sylvia Jope up on the top right. This shows all of the existing plantings that are have never been touched. And then these circled ones are the additional proposed plantings that I worked with the zoning administrator. When I had proposed this plan to him, he had told me it was sufficient and it met the type 1 zoning or the type 1 landscape buffer requirements. So I have planted all of those. And then at the last meeting, it was determined that it was insufficient, that it wasn't enough screening, and I requested some guidance from the DRB. And the suggestion was first step was to have a full plan drawn to scale. So I am looking for your guidance on how I need to provide additional screening.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
So other DRB members and staff members, please weigh in. This is what I would consider, and in the industry is considered to be an existing condition plan. So this shows the existing condition of the buffer prior to placement of additional plantings per our last meeting that we've requested. And so this is a great start. It's to scale. It captures the existing conditions. Now the next step is for you to propose additional plantings to meet the requirements of the Williston development bylaws. And we don't design things at the DRB. I'm not gonna tell you, or our members of the DRB gonna tell you this is the species and this is the type of plan and so on. I would recommend that you have your Sylvia, your landscape architect, and yourself, I would recommend be included in this discussion. Have a meeting and a discussion with staff about what should be added to the existing conditions to meet the criteria. But this is a great start.
And so the meeting with staff, so who is that?
Well, given the fact that Matt originally ruled and the DRB overturned his opinion, I would recommend that you go to Emily.
Emily.
I think it
Pete,
needs
I
to
think
be-
I saw Melinda raise her hand.
Oh, okay. Oh, no problem. Melinda, you're the person. Thank you for that, John. So go see Melinda, set up a time, have a conversation, have a discussion about what the regulations declare for a buffer. And I'm sure that conversation will be fruitful and Sylvia will know what to do. And then you can come back to the DRB and hopefully we can put this issue to bed as far as the planning piece. And then in the spring, you can plant it.
Yeah, and so I guess my one question or ask is, can you provide additional clarity on the regulation? Because it is so vague, you know, that there was already an interpretation in the office that I met it. And so I guess I just need a little more guidance so that we can go into that conversation of what the DRB's interpretation of the rules are.
I would recommend that you do it with Melinda and have that conversation, engage in that conversation with her. And I think it will be fruitful.
Okay. All right, sounds good. Thank you. And
Okay,
thank you for accelerating me up to the front. Appreciate it.
Oh, not a worry. Thank you. Okay, going back to the agenda. Two items in the public hearing portion. DP 22-04 Chittenden Solid Waste District and DP 21-20 Taft Corners Associates. First up is DP 22-04. Who is here representing that application?
Josh Tyler, Chittenden Solid Waste District. I'm the Director of Operations. I'm joined by Tim Shea of the Chittenden Solid Waste District, Associate Director of Operations, and Doug Goulet, our Consulting Engineer.
Great. Welcome all. As disclosure, Doug Goulet and I are neighbors in the same Williston subdivision. I do not see that as a conflict of interest. Okay, first up is staff. Melinda.
Yeah. The Chittenden Solid Waste District would request pre-application review of a proposed 10,000 square foot administrative building with parking and other appurtenances located at 694 Redmond Road in the industrial Zoning District East. The new administrative building would replace the CSWD's existing facility located at 1021 Redmond Road. The property is currently undeveloped except for an existing access road to a Velco storage facility located on a property east of the subject parcel. Staff is recommending the DRB recommend the proposed project proceed discretionary permit with recommendations as drafted. This is the first time the DRB is reviewing this request. In 2001, the DRB approved SUB 0110, and that created the subject parcel. Advisory boards did not review the proposed project. The Public Works Department reviewed the proposed project and.
Melinda, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Just as a
Sure.
point of clarity, I apologize. You said that this was this hearing was a discretionary permit. It's a pre-app, isn't it?
It is a pre-application, sorry, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I
Thank you.
apologize.
No, just want to make sure it's clear.
Okay. Okay, so the Public Works Department did review the site plan and provided comments in a memo dated December 17th, 2021. Their comments are included. We received one comment letter at the time of the mail out from Geraldine and Leyland Carpenter, and you also received that comment letter with your packet. So the dimensional standards in the Industrial Zoning District East, the maximum height is 36 feet. Minimum setback from any road is 50 feet. And the rear and side property line setbacks are controlled by the landscaping requirements of Chapter 23. And there is a requirement that the lot have at least 40 feet of road frontage on an existing public or private road. Compliance with height and setback standards are expected. Outdoor sales and storage are not anticipated for this project. The facilities that are owned and operated by the CSWD have a partial exemption from the use requirements under state and local regulations and are allowed to locate in any zoning district subject to the approval of a discretionary permit by the DRB as provided by 24 VSA 4413E and WDB 4.2.2.5. The town does have authority to regulate location, size, height, building bulk, yards, courts, setbacks, density of buildings, off-street parking and loading facilities, traffic, noise, lighting, landscaping, and screening of the proposed development, as long as it doesn't interfere with the intended functional use. And the applicant has the burden of proof on that. For access, the applicant proposes to use the existing private Velco service road, eliminating the need for a new curb cut along Redmond Road. WDB 13.2.1.2 encourages the use of shared driveways. The existing access road is a 24-foot wide paved road. The applicant has obtained Velco support for use of this road. A maintenance agreement between the applicant and Velco should be submitted at discretionary permit. A recommendation has been drafted. Because the proposed facility will be replacing an existing administrative building, no additional trips are expected to be generated. However, the applicant should still provide estimated trip generation at discretionary permit, and staff is not recommending a traffic study for this project. Traffic impact fees are not imposed by the town for CSWD facilities. For vehicular parking, the applicant's proposing a 41 space parking lot just south of the proposed building. The former bylaw, table 14A, listed, listed allowable rates of off-street parking spaces based on proposed use and building square footage, and specified a rate that served as both a minimum and a maximum. The recently adopted bylaw, Chapter 14, Table 14A, specifies these rates as allowable maximum number of spaces with a required minimum number of spaces as 80% of the allowed maximum, with an option to approve below 80% of the maximum if certain criteria are met. In this case, the applicant's proposing 41 spaces where a maximum of 35 spaces are allowed based on the proposed uses and square footage. Staff is recommending the applicant reduce the number of parking spaces to be within the range of 28 to 35 spaces. Alternately, if the applicant wants to retain those 41 spaces, they can do so using options specified under WDB 14.2.4, such as building a solar canopy, using porous pavement, or providing dedicated spaces for alternate fuel vehicles and carpools. The applicant's proposed number of ADA spaces, short and long-term bicycle spaces, and provision of end-of-trip facility are in compliance with WDB 14A. The applicant's proposing utilities, including on-site wastewater system, on-site drilled well, stormwater collection and treatment system, and underground electric and telecommunications lines. All utilities must be underground and shown on the site plan submitted for discretionary permit. Stormwater collection and treatment must be provided in compliance with Chapter 29. The site plan does show a proposed water line and calls it out as a possible route of new 6-inch water service running through the subject parcel and along Redmond Road. The site plan and discretionary permit needs to provide more details about the water supply, including location of any drilled well and the starting and ending point for the water supply lines. Based on some communication via email that we've had with the Department of Public Works, it's my understanding that CSWD is applying to have water service extended to that parcel and is working with the Department of Public Works on that. A state permit will be required for the extension of any public water supply, but it's really not applicable to the Williston Development Bylaw. For landscaping, the subject parcel is buffered on all sides by existing vegetation, a type 1 buffer. The DRB may wish to consider a condition to require additional screening along Redmond Road where needed to comply with WDB 23. Recommendation has been added. The landscape buffers along the abutting properties appear to comply. For street trees, WDB 26 requires street trees for many developments or redevelopment projects. Street tree plantings can be considered a type 4 buffer and therefore fulfill a portion of a development's overall landscaping requirements. Because the frontage along Redmond Road is buffered by existing vegetation, staff doesn't think that requiring street trees is necessary or appropriate. There are no mapped watershed protection buffers on the subject parcel except for a small Class 2 wetland on the northwest corner of the property, which will be protected with a 50-foot buffer as required by state law and the Williston bylaw. WDB 29.961 requires all watershed protection buffers to remain unmown and in natural native vegetation. To ensure the watershed protection buffer is not disturbed, WDB 29.97 requires the buffer to be marked on the final plans and demarcated on the ground by plantings, a fence, or preferably a line of boulders. The site plan shows an existing stormwater feature east of Redmond Road and north of the access drive that receives runoff from a swale running alongside and parallel to the access drive. The site plan also shows a possible location of stormwater practice for runoff from new impervious surfaces. The proposed project is considered low risk because the amount of land disturbance won't exceed 2 acres and is not anticipated to impact watershed protection buffers or steep slopes. Low-risk projects are not required to submit a runoff and erosion control plan, but are required to submit the completed runoff and erosion control checklist. The site plan submitted with discretionary permit application must, however, show the locations of stormwater infrastructure. Outdoor lighting that is proposed as part of this project must meet all the requirements of WDB Chapter 24. If outdoor lighting is proposed, the applicant should submit a lighting plan as part of the application submitted for discretionary permit. Lighting plan must include lighting levels, lighting locations, and lighting specifications demonstrating compliance with standards of Chapter 24. Signage can likely be approved administratively for the proposed project, and a master sign plan will not be required if signage is within the limitations of WDB Table 25A. Signage exceeding these limits will require a master sign plan. Subject parcels not within any town designated conservation areas. Chapter 27 is not applicable to the project. And the proposed project is exempt from paying impact fees because the applicant is the Chittenden Solid Waste District. And there are some recommendations for you to consider. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, applicant is next. You get a chance to supplement Melinda's staff report before we open it up for questions from the DRB. So Josh or Tim or Doug, do you have any supplemental comments?
At this point, the report seemed reasonable. I will take the advice and probably put in 2 EV spaces and 3 carpool spaces in the parking area. Looks pretty reasonable to me. Doug, do you have anything to add, or Tim?
No, maybe Simon can bring up the sketch plan though, just for reference.
Yep.
While he's bringing that up, can I ask a question, Pete?
Absolutely.
Just a question on that parking demand. I'm curious how you came up with 41 spaces, or I guess what a typical day would look like for this building.
It ranges. We do hold safety committee meetings, which is an internal committee. That brings upwards of 12 extra people onto the site. We roughly have 25 full-time employees at our existing facility. I think it's 24 at this point. We have three positions to fill. So we also do hold workshops sometimes. And so the idea with those would most likely be after hours, but there are times when we have meetings and bring people in. We are considering using this as our exec board meeting space as well. We do use the town of Williston for our full board. I don't think we're going to get enough room into it to go away from that, but we'll see. Kind of when our architects kind of roll their sleeves up. But yeah, that was the idea, is just not to undersupply the amount of parking. And we've hit as much as 30 to 35 people. We've had to park over at our compost facility in the past to do that. So that was kind of, we tried to get as many in as we could.
Thank you.
Yep.
And David, it was basically an oversight that I failed to look at the new regulations and the new parking table. So I would have maybe commented on that before showing the 41. But as Josh said, we definitely will provide some EV parking and carpool parking that to get the numbers down a bit to be within the range of the current bylaw.
Okay.
Having said that, now that the plan's up, I'll just give a quick overview. What's shown for building is 10,000 square feet. Once an architect gets more involved, I'm sure that footprint will change somewhat, but that's sort of the general placeholder, if you will, on the general location of the site. We anticipate the building, as Melinda said, parking will be to the west down slope of the building. And then further down slope will be our stormwater treatment facility. Way down to the west, there's a proposed wastewater disposal system. We've done soil test pits. They're well-drained Adams soils in that location. So we've done preliminary calculations to know that area is sufficiently sized to accommodate the amount of flow we anticipate from the occupants of the building. The existing, as Melinda said, we propose to come off the existing Velco service road as for access to the new building. It's 24 feet wide, paved, in great shape. It's a very aggressive cross section because Velco brings very large equipment in and out of their storage facility, which is just off the site plan to the east. So no problem with the adequacy, in our view anyway, of the existing service road to provide service for the office building. I think that's about it. We have met with, we had a meeting with Peter Lynn from Velco. As Melinda went over, they're agreeable. They have a 300-foot wide easement that's shown on the plan. The service access goes through that easement, but but CSWD owns the land. So, so they're absolutely amenable to accommodating us. They've looked at this plan. They're fine with the service or our driveway location. I think one of their only comments, which is a good one, is there's a gate right now down fairly close to Redmond Road. Obviously, that gate would have to be moved easterly, so it's beyond the entrance to our new building. They suggested it actually be all the way up to the common property lines. And our project would take care of that gate relocation. I think that's it. We've looked at the proposed recommendations and we're good with that. Josh, maybe an update on the water supply, which seemed to be a point of discussion.
Yeah, currently we have it back with Public Works and we're working through finalizing it. We met with, we're going down their checklist. So we met with Green Mountain Power to talk about power line locations and, you know, how our water line will work its way up the road, up Redmond Road. So things are looking good, and the anticipation is we'll have a water line in place so that we can hook it into this admin building by the time we look to construct the admin building.
So obviously at that point, the drilled well proposal would be off the table.
Correct.
That's all I
Okay.
had.
Anything else from the applicant before I turn it over to the DRB?
Nope.
Okay, DRB members, questions, please.
This is Dave Turner. One question is, the people that will be working in this building, do they currently work in the Redmond Road facility or will they be coming from another facility?
Everybody's going to transfer from the existing 1021 location over to this new administrative building. We got about 30 years out of the raised ranch and we're running out of space. And COVID's really proved that we don't have adequate room to keep a stat of each other's way.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What is the future of the existing building?
We don't necessarily have one right now. We're kind of waiting for this thing. We've been talking about this building for about 15 to 20 years, this new admin building. So as soon as it gets built, we're kind of open. You know, we are a solid waste organization. There is a month's largest composting facility across the street from it. So we haven't made any real determinations yet, I guess I should say.
Other questions?
Yeah, Pete, I've got one or two. I see that Melinda's described that there was that you were proposing an end of trip facility within the building, but I didn't see that in any of the materials that you submitted, and I mean, obviously there's no floor plan here to do that. So can you confirm that there is an end of trip facility planned within the building, as well as the bike storage inside?
That's one of the requirements when we design the actual footprint of the building. Right now, we just laid out the 10,000 square feet as not to exceed. But that will probably, in my personal opinion, decrease a little bit. But yes, there will be. That's part of our next next engagement with our next consultant, which is the architects, to really design the building.
All right. You know, I don't have very many comments. I mean, there's not a lot here to comment on without having a plan or any building elevations, or I'm not sure that you've gone through kind of code issues yet either. So, or any requirements that may show up on the site plan based on that, such as fire lanes or whatnot around the building. So, but I did have a question on where are the site boundaries that are going to have the buffering requirements applied to them?
So I can answer that, John. There is no subdivision proposed. This parcel is 34 acres, so we're at the far north end of the 34 acres. So the property line you see that Simon's pointing to is the northerly property line, and if you were to scroll down a little bit, the easterly line is the dark line shown at the top of the screen, and then it goes a quarter mile or so to the south, all the way to almost the IBM entrance road. Yeah, Global Foundries, sorry.
Okay. So when you say there's an existing buffer, you're talking about what's all along the road, along Redmond Road, not along the Velco easement drive, as I assume that's a driveway that's running along inside your property. Is that right? So there's no screening required there.
Right. The screening or the buffers only pertain to the perimeter property lines, which are fairly heavily vegetated right now.
Right, and I think we can see that. I mean, the one exception on the what is that? The north, on the left there. Is that actually, that says CSWD, doesn't it? Right there, as the neighboring property owner.
That's correct.
Okay, but it's a different parcel owned by your client.
Correct.
Okay. Emily, would that or Melinda, does that require buffering between two parcels owned by the same entity?
So our bylaw treats abutting parcels, even if they're physically separated by boundary, but if they're owned by the same entity, they're treated as one parcel.
Okay. So that entire north parcel is essentially the buffer. So, okay. All right, that helps a lot in understanding kind of the buffering conversation. And I guess, Simon, maybe you can circle and make sure I'm understanding the buffer along the road. Is that copse of trees there, just or would that be west of the septic field? Yeah, right there. Yeah, it's a pretty dense thicket. It seems, just commenting out loud to the rest of the board, it seems crazy to tear those down to put in street trees along a road that doesn't really fit with the idea of street trees very well.
I think I would chime in here and argue that this is set so far back from the road with, lots of perimeter buffering that I don't think there's a heck of a lot needed here. To me, at this point, it's an esoteric discussion.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I agree with John's point, is that for the character of the area, street trees would look odd.
They would look pretty cool if you did them all along the Velco driveway, but that's not part of this conversation.
Yeah, that actually could look cool, but
we're not into cool here.
But that's not something. It's not something that's within our purview here to ask for either.
Pete, that's all. Those are all the comments I had today.
Okay. Any other members of the DRB comments, please?
Yeah, one comment. I'd like you to consider looking at the porous parking We need one of you guys to step up and actually build some of that because I believe in it.
Well, how about this? We'll take a look. I'm a believer in it as well, so we'll see what it looks like. You know, Doug and I will put our heads together. How's that sound?
Yeah, like I said, don't just immediately pull back from 41. We could have 41. Just make sure some of it's porous because I think it'd be a nice demonstration project so other companies could say, oh yeah, you can actually do it.
And we are in control of our own sanding and salting, so we could regulate that pretty well.
I just had a quick question on the site, not necessarily the site plan itself, but just looking at the aerial, I guess just east of that existing, the kind of teardrop stormwater feature, it looks like there's is it a driveway that's like perpendicular to the road where the stone ditch kind of goes underneath?
Yes, David, it's a sort of a little gravel service road, probably built when they built the stormwater pond.
Okay, so that was just to get access across that ditch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. That's where I always just park when I go to the site. It's big enough for a single vehicle to pull out and park.
Yeah. Okay. I couldn't quite tell from the ortho what it was.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, members of the public. Any questions? Anybody out there that has a question go through the DRB? But questions pertaining to this application, please raise your Zoom hand, please.
I'm not seeing any raised hands on Zoom, so I don't think anyone's got any questions.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Okay, last chance for questions from the DRB. Any wrap-up comments by the applicant?
Thank you for having us and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. 7:43. We're going to close DP 22-04. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good night.
Okay. Next up is DP 21-20, Taft Corners Associates, care of JL Davis. I'm going to recuse myself from this hearing. The reason is my employer, DEW, does work with JL Davis, and so I have an inherent conflict of interest on this application. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hemmelgarn to head this up, and I will be a member of the audience for this application.
Thank you, Pete. So at this time, I guess I would ask, I guess, Pete, did you actually open that hearing, or is that something I should do here first? You're muted. All right, let's just open this hearing at 7:44, whether we need to or not. So I would ask whoever's representing the owner to come forward, identify yourselves, give your name and your address, please.
Jeff Nick with JL Davis Realty at offices in Burlington, Vermont.
And Jeff, do you have anybody else that's here this evening?
We got Andy Rowe with us.
Good evening, Andy.
Good evening. I was having trouble turning video on and unmuting, but Simon's got me fixed up now. Thank you.
All right, so your address there, Andy?
Sorry, good evening, Andy Rowe, Lamoureux and Dickinson, 14 Morris Drive, Essex.
Thank you. Great. So I guess who's got this from a staff standpoint can give us the report.
Emily.
Hello, Emily.
All right. So this is a request for pre-application review of a proposed grocery store and 3-story apartment building with urban parking and related appurtenances on a 2.34 acre project area located along Wright Ave and future Trader Lane. The land is currently vacant. The grocery store would be built initially. The apartment building and Trader Lane would be built in the future. The proposed use is commercial and residential. It will have access onto town roads. Located in the Taft Corner zoning district where it is subject to design review, Conservation Commission review is not applicable. Tonight, staff is recommending approval, but only if the DRB reviews recommendations about access, pedestrian safety, parking, site layout, and architectural design. This approval will also authorize the grocery store to proceed to discretionary permit and the apartment building to proceed to growth management review. This is the first time the DRB is reviewing the application. It was originally submitted in the fall and the applicant requested a continuance and revised their application. Some may remember that this property was the Skateland roller rinks from approximately 1977 to 2000. Since then, there have been minor changes to the lots around it in terms of subdivision. The land was subdivided to create the bank next door, Northfield Savings Bank, and Skateland was demolished in 2003. The HAC recommendations were submitted on January 4th, and they are included below. Public Works and fire comments are also included. I do note that some of the fire comments conflict with the zoning bylaw, and they're noted here. No comment letters were received at the time of mail out. However, we did receive a letter from Brian Forrest yesterday, and that has been uploaded online and emailed to the DRB. This property is located in the Taft Corner zoning district where a grocery store and residential are allowed uses. I do note in bold text some important points for the DRB to consider tonight. In terms of dimensional standards, the DRB should discuss the location of surface parking along Wright Ave, noting the HAC recommendation number 4 about reorienting the building to increase the frontage along Wright Ave while maintaining a strong facade along Trader Lane. Right now, the parking lot has a long frontage along Wright Ave, where typically that should be set back to the side or rear of the building. There is a specific standard in the Taft Corners area for Adirondack views that the discretionary permit demonstrate how they will be featured. The site layout could be used to use those views in the urban park. And the DRB may edit recommendation 1B. For example, the urban park is located downhill of a grade change. The applicant mentioned a retaining wall during the hearing, the HAC review process. So the DRB might want to discuss how those views can be better utilized in the urban park. The development standards are discussed below with Chapter 22 design review. And Taft Corners does have the 5 of 9 design criteria, which must be provided cumulatively across the project area. The applicant is proposing multiple uses, multiple stories, wide sidewalks, an urban park, and public art. The DRB might want to consider discussing how this would be phased into the discretionary permit review, and a recommendation is included below. I do have a note here about vested rights. Tonight, the DRB should focus on the current unified development bylaws, but recognize that a form-based code is anticipated in the coming months, which will change the development and design review standards in this zoning district. Projects are vested in the current version of a bylaw when a complete discretionary permit is filed. And there's some caveats here that are noted. Similarly, with discretionary permit procedures, a development agreement will be required for review. and a boundary line adjustment will be required. The garage access for the apartment building is proposed on an abutting parcel, lot 12 of a different subdivision. And all that land would need to be shown as one parcel at discretionary permit. The draft motion authorizes this application to proceed to growth management in March 2023. The site plan identifies 24 units, and it is subject to the growth center criteria in Chapter 11. Access, Wright Ave and Trader Lane are proposed bridge streets that are shown on the town plan map 4. I note here in this section that the DRB and applicant should discuss the bicycle and pedestrian access, particularly in the parking lot and where vehicles will turn from Wright Ave into the parking lot. The DRB and applicant should discuss alternatives such as a reconfigured parking lot with a rank of parking between the entrance and drive aisle, one-way movement through the parking lot, raised pedestrian crossing with texture, or a protected pedestrian walkway through the parking lot, basically to reduce that conflict between customers with shopping carts entering and exiting the store and vehicles turning in and out of the parking lot. Similarly, there's a recommendation for connectivity with abutting properties, and also a recommendation that a traffic study be provided at discretionary permit. Parking and loading at discretionary permit. It must include vehicular and bicycle parking in compliance with Chapter 14. This must include a shared parking study. The intent of this bylaw is to reduce surface parking to the maximum extent possible, and there's possibility for a share between a residential use and a grocery store. In terms of parking lot design, the discretionary permit must include a cohesive parking lot shared between the grocery store and future building. As highlighted here, you can see there's an inefficient use of space and unusual circulation pattern between the grocery store lot and the future parking lot. And reiterating the discussion above, the parking lot design must protect pedestrians that are moving through the parking area, especially near the main entrance. What follows is a summary of the parking requirements that would need to be finalized at discretionary permit. Under maintenance, there are some specific recommendations that are included: trash and recycling receptacles along the sidewalks near street corners, identifying snow storage or snow removal plans, and a plan for solid waste management. I note here that grocery store dumpsters should be hidden from public view, and anticipate the storage of pallets, boxes, compost, or any other unusual or bulky waste items that are associated with the grocery store, that they all be screened in accordance with the bylaw. Compatibility, potential nuisances, and hazards. This section of the bylaw talks about the screening of mechanical installation, particularly that rooftop mechanical be screened with a parapet, not fences on the roof around the mechanical units. This may require raising the wall heights, and the sloped roof may also need to change to maintain the entryway proportions. HAC recommendation is included. Ground level mechanical should also be screened from view. What follows is a summary of density as it would apply to the residential component of the bylaw. Right now, the applicant has not identified a TDR or affordability provisions that would allow for a density bonus. Design review. The HAC reviewed the application on December 21st and finalized their recommendations on January 4th. There's a long list and all the recommendations are included. Generally, they found that the building needs more articulation of the roof line, more windows, and that the windows shown be true windows that let light into the building, more pedestrian space near the main entrance, and a seating wall along the south elevation. They're generally pleased with how planters are integrated into the facade, the sloped roof, and how the main entrance connects to Wright Avenue. Some of their recommendations are inspired by the Aldi in Plain City, which is shown below. The hack did discuss and could not come into agreement with the placement of the stone veneer base, how it's different on the east facade from the west and south facades, and there's two options in recommendation number 4A for the DRB to review and choose. And this is the photo of the Aldi in Plain City, where it has the more prominent entryway that utilizes art. However, the hack does discourage the fade windows that are shown above the canopy. Discretionary permit must include a landscaping plan. The landscaping requirements will be different for the grocery store building, a retail or service commercial use, and the future building, which is mixed use, including residential. Basically, the north property line can have different buffers in those areas. Along the south and west, street trees will be required on those frontages. The recommendations for street trees, watershed health, outdoor lighting, and signs in public art are all standard recommendations. I do note that the sign area would need to come into compliance with the bylaw, reducing wall signage area. And lastly, impact fees. Construction of bridge streets can be considered an in-kind contribution and be credited towards the impact fee liability. And this would need to be shown at discretionary permit with a vehicle trip summary and cost estimate for road construction. What follows is the list of recommendations as drafted by the hack and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So there's a lot in here to discuss, I think, this evening. I think we'll eventually get to all of them, but I do like to give the applicant a chance to make an initial response or to highlight anything in particular they want us to pay attention to, or to comment on anything in the staff report.
Great, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Yep,
Welcome.
okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna let Andy Rowe do most of the heavy lifting here to add to Emily's report. But just briefly, in terms of the architecture, we've talked to Aldi's, and they're certainly willing to work with the town and the board to modify the architecture to conform with the recommendations of the hack. There was one, and we're willing, I think we're able and willing to adhere to most of the recommendations from staff. There are a couple of things that we might differ on. One is the L-shaped building for the second building to add street frontage to Wright Avenue. That seems to be problematic. It would get in the way of that pocket park. I was on the site this weekend and looking at those Adirondack views, and they are quite dramatic from that location. That's where the pocket park is proposed. It would be blocked on the north. It would have the north would be the building, and on the east side would be a retaining wall, and it'd be a public art introduced into that little park. So that's what we'd like to see there. And I think Andy can modify that parking lot so it would merge into the Aldi's parking lot. I'll also say that Aldi's has modified their floor plan, which you haven't seen yet, but they are introducing end-of-trip facilities, shower, and indoor bicycle parking there. So with that, I'll let Andy, you want to add anything to what Emily said?
I guess depending on how the DRB wants to go, whether you want to work down through the staff report or questions.
Yeah, can we put the site plan up on the screen? I think that's always a helpful backdrop here for us to be looking at, and then maybe you can give everyone a quick tour of the site to make sure we're all talking about the same elements, and we understand how the site is laid out and what's on there.
Okay, so the grocery store is proposed at the easterly end of the site. Um, We'll confirm this between or before discretionary permit, but I believe that the bank is actually on a leased portion of this lot, and the future building, the grocery store, and the bank are all on the same parcel. Again, with a lease area being defined for the bank. So the grocery store is on the easterly portion. The future building is on the westerly portion, largely fronting on Trader Lane. And there would be two curb cuts along Wright Avenue, one close to the front door of the grocery store. Again, there's access into the grocery store at the southwest corner, to the west facing the parking lot, and also to the south facing Wright Avenue. And on the east side of the building is the loading area, with that little appendage to the building being the loading dock, a single loading dock, and then trash. And we'll also look at the need for outside storage as suggested by staff for bulky items, pallets, that sort of thing. The two curb cuts are intended to allow circulation for deliveries through the site. So they would come in past the front of the building, back into the loading area, and then continue to the west and exit back out onto Wright Avenue. Initially, there would be 98 spaces constructed for the grocery store. The area that's shown to the west would be additional parking for the multifamily. And it is somewhat inefficient in that there's an aisle with only a bay of parking on one side. But we didn't want to have an additional curb cut onto Wright Avenue. We will explore the possibility of combining the garage access and the access to that parking lot for the multifamily. That may complicate things as far as shared parking a little bit between the two uses. But we will look at shared parking. I suspect that a Saturday morning might be the peak here between the multifamily and the grocery store. But there may be the potential for a little bit of shared parking between the two uses. At the north end of the multifamily building, as I mentioned, there's a garage access. There would be structured parking on the lowest level of the building. In all likelihood, that would be a little bit lower than Trader Lane, but probably not 11 feet lower, allowing street level, either street level residential units or commercial in there. But again, the design of Trader Lane, although there was an earlier design, the design of Trader Lane isn't complete, or Wright Avenue for that matter, although again, there was a design done back in 2007, 2009. So, but there will be some adjustments to Trader Lane, I believe. Wright Avenue will probably remain much as it was originally anticipated. So construction of the grocery store would involve construction of Wright Avenue to the intersection, or to its end, to the intersection with Trader Lane. Construction of the multifamily building, I presume, would require at least a segment of Trader Lane be constructed if Trader Lane hasn't progressed on its own prior to that. To the east is the former TD Bank, currently occupied by Dealer Policy. I guess one of the, not to jump too far ahead, but so long as we're looking at the site plan here, in terms of connections between this property and the Dealer Policy property to the east, if the access in front of the building was extended east, it would intersect the former drive-through lane, teller lane, around the Dealer Policy building. I don't know whether the bank still occupies a portion of that. I know they did for a period of time. If the drive aisle to the west was extended, it intersects a parking area towards the westerly end of the property. Jeff can comment on this as well, but I believe that there's been some at least initial discussions about that property potentially gaining access to Trader Lane. And I guess we can report back on that more at discretionary permit. But if that property was to acquire access to Trader Lane in the future, would there be need to acquire access through this property to Wright Avenue? Construction of a public street would not only add cost, but it would also add the right of way through this property, which would have a ripple effect in terms of the right of way width, street trees, potential setbacks. And as I mentioned, with the drive lane there to the former teller window, it's not the greatest setup for connecting parking lots. It's not like their parking lot comes relatively close to the property line, and the parking lot on the grocery store side does come relatively close to the parking lot or close to the property line, but there's not a logical connection point there necessarily. So again, if dealer policy was to connect to Trader Lane, I guess we question the need for access through this property to Wright Avenue as well.
All right.
And I can answer any general questions about the site, or we can jump into the sort of progress through the staff report.
Right. I think, yeah, I'd like to get there soon enough. I guess one of the questions I would ask is, I see on here the word future a lot. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about the intents here for the phasing of the project. Clearly, you know, the construction of the apartment building and the urban park and the artwork, or the public art, are all part of the proposal for the grocery store to gain approval here. So what is the time frame that you're looking at here for the future development at this site?
We don't, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, right now, the market is certainly good right now for this type of project. So there's probably not going to be a lot of delay here, you know, within a couple of years, I would say. And that's probably the time that the Pocket Park would be built as well, because it's kind of adjacent to that building.
A couple of years? That seems like a long time, given the fact that this is a single proposal that we're being asked to approve tonight, or to move forwards tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we could come back with a firm timetable for the next meeting.
Well,
Yeah.
I think just one thing to note on the future building, because it's residential and it requires growth management, you know, they wouldn't be able to proceed with a discretionary permit on that until after March of 2023, if they were fortunate enough to get all of their allocation. They could conceivably proceed right away with the residential building, but if they would have a year to submit the discretionary permit application after growth management was approved, but depending upon what the growth management allocation is, that may delay the construction of that building simply to a point where, you know, they can construct it and have growth management for all of the units being built.
All right. Well, I'm just wondering about, you know, what if the market changes significantly in that period of time, and now there's no ability or desire to actually construct that. That kind of throws the permit for the grocery store, which is now complete, and people are shopping there every week. You know, it's kind of hard to revoke that permit, and yet part of the approval of this project is contingent on construction of that apartment building. So I'm a little concerned about how we can get the assurances that we need to make that happen.
John, I'm not so sure I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I think this lot allows for a commercial building and an apartment building with requirements for a park and view shed and what have you, but you don't have to build it all at once. And I don't think there's any requirement to put an apartment building on here at all. It's simply allowed for it. It is allowed in the bylaws, and there's enough room for it.
Well,
So-
except for, well, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
So, and so I don't think that, if you want, I guess if you wanted to just, erase that from the area and they came back at a later date to put an apartment building here, you could run it, you could do it that way. That's not what they've done.
Right.
But I don't think there's a requirement that this be all built at once, nor do I think that the staff report even says that.
No, well, but it does say that the 5 of 9 elements, one of them is the multiple uses, which in my understanding is that the residential use is the multiple use that's being proposed here.
So I think
And
that
that's where I was headed with that.
I got it. Okay, so in that case, it may be that those 5 of 9 criteria don't apply, and they may need to come back with a different one. If the apartment building isn't being built. In other words, we couldn't consider it.
Right. But, yeah, go ahead. I mean,
It's just, if I may, it seems like we might be hung up between two different requirements that the town has imposed on us. One is the 5 of 9. We're happy to build an apartment building and hit the 5 of 9 with the multiple uses. At the same time, as Andy pointed out, we've got growth management. So on one hand, you're asking for multiple uses, which we've complied with, but then we run into growth management, which delays us in that. So it is a 2-year process based on the growth management requirement. So I'm not sure how you can hang us up on the fact that the growth management is the kind of the culprit here.
I understand, and I can understand that this doesn't all get built at once. Certainly, we have a large example very close by here where there was a phased implementation of a larger development. It was obviously much larger than this. What I want to make sure is that there's some assurance from the town and the DRB, though, that what is approved is actually constructed. And I don't know how to do that when I see here that there's future roads that are involved here, that we should be seeing something that doesn't say future. It should be proposed. And that's where I'm getting hung up, is I don't understand the difference between future and proposed, and why we're not looking at something that says we're going to build the road here, there's going to be a road right there, and here's the building that's part of this project.
Andy, can you comment on where is the town and everybody on Trader Lane and the Act 250 and the permitting at Trader Lane? Because I think that's all we're waiting for, right?
Well, I believe that the landowner and the town have been in discussions for quite some time about a cooperative agreement between the two parties that would advance that. But I don't believe that they've reached a final agreement in order to move that forward. I guess, correct me, either staff or DRB, but I'm assuming that with this project moving forward, it would be a requirement that Wright Ave is constructed from where it ends now at Merchants Row to the intersection with Trader Lane with the grocery store, and that with the construction of the residential building, that at a minimum, the frontage of Trader Lane from Wright Avenue to the north, whatever that distance is, 200 feet or so, would be required to be constructed in order for those projects, those two buildings to move forward. They would move forward at 2 separate times. And it may be that Trader Lane needs to go, would certainly need to go at least to the garage access. It wouldn't just go to the property line if in fact there was an easement for the garage access as opposed to a boundary line adjustment. I guess the other thing I might note on the future building is, I think it's a requirement to meet the 5 of 9 that a multi-story building be built there and that it be multiple uses. It couldn't be another grocery store, but not that office is a really great market now, but it could be office, it could be retail, it could be a number of different uses with residential on the upper floors, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be all residential. Not that that's the applicant's intention, but I think in order to meet the 5 and 9, it's got to be multiple stories. It's got to have that certain footprint in order to meet the multiple story criteria, and it needs to have multiple uses.
Right, yeah. Well, I don't think anybody want a third grocery store in the neighborhood anyways, but so yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you make, that it wouldn't necessarily have to be a residential use to meet the 5 of 9. I guess part of my question might be back towards staff here in terms of what is the time expectations to meet or to develop the 5 of 9 elements on any given development. Obviously, on Finney Crossing, it's taken quite a long time to do that, but that's a huge development, much larger parcel than this.
Right. The bylaw itself is silent on the timing that's required for the 5 of 9 criteria to be met. It's kind of a reasonableness factor. What my threshold was when thinking about writing recommendation number 1A is that the discretionary permit, if the grocery store is to happen in the first phase, the discretionary permit needs to show us with some certainty that the rest of the site can support the building as proposed. So show us cohesive parking and utility plan. One of the 5 of 9 criteria is multiple stories, be 60% of the floor area. So if the grocery store is 19,000 and some odd square feet, the footprint of that future building needs to be a certain size, and it needs to be 3 stories to meet that threshold. So discretionary permit, I would want to see that the application is moving in the right direction for the 5 of 9 to be met across the project area, and that the discretionary permit site engineering isn't hemming the project area into a corner where it can't meet the multiple story 60% threshold, or it's not meeting the multiple uses standard. Wide sidewalks, we would need to see construction specifications for Wright Ave and Trader Lane. Whether Trader Lane gets built now or with the future building, that phasing can be somewhat nebulous, but knowing that the specifications are there. Similarly with the urban park and public artwork, the DRB can think about, does the discretionary permit show a solidified plan here, or is it getting squished and moved to the side of the grocery store site plan?
Okay. Do any of the other board members, while we're on this subject, I think, I'd like to kind of work through this one first, and then we can leave it go and dive into the other options or other issues that are out there. Any other questions or clarifications that you would want on this?
Yeah, one question. What happens if Trader Lane's never built? What I mean by never, I'm talking about in my lifetime.
Now,
10
40
years.
units can be served by a single, 40 residential units can be served by a single point of access. So they wouldn't need that two curb cuts for 24 apartment units. So I don't know, Matt, I don't see anything in our bylaw that would mandate that they would only need to build that portion of Trader Lane if they're proposing part of the access to it.
Right, so as it's shown on the plan right now, there's a part of the parking for the proposed residential building that can only be accessed from Trader Lane. Could there be some other design of a similar building that could take all of its needed access from Wright Avenue? Probably, and Emily's right. With a 40 unit limit, under current bylaw, this 2.34 acre lot would serve up to 17 and a half dwelling unit equivalents. So it's unlikely that the applicants would go over the 40 units or fit anywhere near that number in a building of this size. So there's probably a way that this site could be developed with a building more or less in that location without constructing any of Trader Lane. But you'd have to see that at discretionary permit. You know, you're either going to get a discretionary permit that proposes to build a piece of Trader Lane in order to build this residential building, or that doesn't, or one that offers the options. The bylaw requirement is for safe access.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, I guess, Paul, I appreciate that question, but, you know, I think more generically is, you know, what if something else happens and that makes it difficult or not viable to complete the development on the site? And I guess that's probably a question that can be asked of a lot of different developments. But you know, I guess I just looked at DP to have some assurance that this project is moving forwards, and that the developer is moving deliberately towards conclusion of all the proposed items on the site. The other issue that I think was mentioned here at one point by Emily was the concept that the Williston zoning rules are about to change. And I'm not sure how this future building, whether it's even going to need to comply with the current WDB, or is it going to need to comply with the potential form-based code that's coming up? And Matt, I'm not sure even how that plays into this conversation.
So the point in our bylaw at which projects vest in the version of the bylaw that will be applied to them going forward is when a complete application for a discretionary permit is filed. So to the extent that this future building is filed for as part of a complete application for a discretionary permit, i.e. if it's filed for a discretionary permit as part of the grocery store, it's vested in today's version of the bylaw. Does that make sense? Or is there something I could clarify beyond that?
Well, yeah, I mean, would that mean that there's a full design for this building that's submitted at the time that the discretionary permit is put in front of us for the grocery store? And if that's the case, how can you do that if it has to go through growth management first?
Well, that's a fair question. Typically, we don't think of a discretionary permit application as being ripe for review if it's a residential project, unless the project has received allocation under the growth management system, which, as you pointed out earlier in the hearing, happens once a year. So in this case, you have a proposed grocery store that relies on a residential building to meet 2 of the 5 of 9 criteria for the grocery store's approval. I think that a complete application for a discretionary permit that is approvable under the 5 of 9 needs to show that that building can be built. It needs to show it on the site. It needs to show it at a level of design such that the DRB can review it against all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw. As far as the ability of that building to move forward as a residential building with allocation, you simply won't know that until March of 23. In other cases where the 5 of 9 criteria have been met across multiple buildings on a site, and I'm calling out Finney Crossing as an example, the residential component came first and the allocation had been received by the time master plans for that project came into place. So this is a little different than that. And we're in a little bit of murky territory. there's a checklist that was prepared by a zoning administrator prior to me that I use to determine whether a discretionary permit application is complete and ready for review. I don't necessarily, when I'm accepting an application, rule on whether that application is approvable or not, although we certainly as a staff help applicants understand where those sticking points might be. The ruling that is made when we take something in, and when I accept it as zoning administrator, is the application complete? And so this is a unique situation. You could certainly submit a complete design for everything on this site, both grocery store and residential building. And you'd be submitting all of the pieces of information the DRB would need to review the project against the bylaw, except you would not be able to approve all of that in a single phase until growth management had happened. So again, I feel like I'm making it murkier rather than clearer, John, but
I would agree.
There's a normal course of events that is followed for a mixed-use project, including residential. And usually what that means is there's not a build out of any of that project until there's the beginnings of a residential build out, and there's an ability to do that.
So are you saying that we could receive this application, we could review it, we could deem it approvable, but we wouldn't be able to approve it because it wouldn't have growth management?
Right, or rather, I might be able to accept it as complete, but you might not be able to approve it.
But we'd have to, but the applicant is asking us to approve the grocery store. And
Correct.
I would say the applicant is reasonably asking us to approve the grocery store.
Correct. And so the grocery store by itself and its appurtenances does not meet the 5 of 9 criteria. So what I'm concerned about, John, is that I'm asked at some point in the future to inspect and issue a certificate of occupancy to this grocery store. And the grocery store is there, and on its site, it's meeting 2 or 3 of the 5 of 9, and 2 of the other 2 are missing. And I would need to issue a certificate that says that that grocery store can be up and running, essentially on the hope that the other 2 criteria would eventually be met by the development of the second building.
Matt, John, I got one
Go
quick
ahead,
question.
go, please, Scott. I think you're going to ask what I was going to. Go ahead.
Okay, would it, if maybe, when form-based code comes into play, does the 5 of 9, does the 5 of 9 goes away, correct?
Yes.
So is this where you were going to go, John?
No, it isn't. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yours is more interesting.
Well, so if at this point we can reasonably expect that form-based code is going, is maybe going to occur by May or June, maybe a little earlier.
Certainly, we hope to be done by the end of the fiscal year. Yes.
Does it make sense to table this until that comes into play, because of the position you are going to get put in if a grocery store is built but nothing else is, leaving a void in the 5 of 9?
It would certainly be efficient if this project was definitely subject to one code or the other. But this project as proposed, at least under the current draft form-based code that's under consideration by the Planning Commission, it's not approvable. This project would not meet the building form standards or the street placement standards in the regulating plan in that draft code. So this project, to go forward in any semblance of what you see on the site plan today, it would need to go forward under today's bylaws.
So what I'm hearing is then that from the discussion that has occurred, that you can't be put in a position of approving a 19,000 square foot grocery store without the future building being built at the same time.
I'm not going to go so far as to say built at the same time. I think that the question of vesting, again, what version of the bylaws applies to somebody's project, happens at the time that a complete application for a discretionary permit is filed. So I go back to that point of it's when does the zoning administrator take that fairly detailed application across the desk and say, this is complete and ready for the staff to write a staff report, ready for us to put on a DRB agenda.
So, anything else, Scott? Do you want to follow up there?
No, I'm fine for the time being.
Okay, shoot. Because I'm having a hard time kind of putting this into a coherent format of questions. So Matt, is it even possible, are we allowed to review something, a residential component of a project like this before it has growth management allocation?
Well, I will draw a parallel for you and maybe you can make your own judgment on it. The DRB does review overall subdivision layouts for subdivisions that only have partial allocation. So, you know, when you looked at, for example, phase 1 of the Northridge subdivision, there was allocation to build phase 1, and there was an overall subdivision plan and plat showing street layouts, infrastructure, and lot layouts that included phase 2, for which there was not yet any allocation. And, you know, phase 2 was not a complete blank on the site plan. It was designed, and we certainly looked at it and made sure that it was in compliance with the bylaw. So in a sense, yes. And I'll say, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking about the complexities and timing related to this project and thinking about all the things that would make life easier. So of course, it would make life easier if the 5 of 9 were simply met by the grocery store as a standalone project, because then we wouldn't worry about what was going to happen on the rest of the site. And as Andy mentioned earlier, it actually makes life a little easier if that additional building was an office building, because then it's not bogged down by the timing element of growth management. Some folks in this day and age may question whether it's wise to propose to build any additional office space in Chittenden County, given market conditions. But an office building meets the multiple stories criteria in the 5 of 9, and it meets the multiple uses requirement. Office uses are generally more than different enough from a grocery store to meet the multiple uses criteria. So neither of those things is the case at pre-app, but could be modifications that could move this forward in a timely manner that might keep it under review under the version of the zoning that exists today.
And that require, whoa, I'm getting some feedback there. There we go, that's better. So, and that, as you say, would be to get a DP in front of the, or into your office before the form-based code goes into effect, or?
Correct, and you know, the timing on that is a little bit up in the air. But if a DP is filed before the form-based code is warned as a hearing by the select board, then the DP would be reviewed under today's bylaws.
So now we have a new player, the select board.
Right, and you know, this is playing out in a neighboring community to us right now, where South Burlington has zoning changes that are warned as a hearing by the city council. And as my counterpart in South Burlington referred to it, it's the zoning vortex, where both the current zoning and the proposed zoning are applicable for a period of 150 days while the city council reviews that proposed zoning at its hearing. So for the purposes of DRB, I'm really not trying to make this any more complicated than it needs to be. Suffice to say, there is a date in the relatively near future at which point the bylaw we're reviewing this project under tonight as a pre-application will no longer be all of the requirements that a project on this piece of land will need to meet.
Right. Well, it certainly is the task of this board, though, is to review projects based on what the current enforceable zoning bylaw is. And so this board requests clarity always about what the rules are that we're enforcing. I guess I also don't want to be encouraging or development that nobody wants. I mean, I think we should be trying to make the best Williston that we can. And I think that it seems that this residential use right there is consistent with a lot of things that we're looking at, that the extension of these roads in a grid pattern is what we've been looking for a long time. So I'd like to find a way to make this work. Again, I'm going to go right back to where my initial concern, which is what happens when this when you have to approve the grocery store and the rest of the foundation upon which this permit is based, the 5 of 9, isn't in place, and how does the board get assurances that that's going to happen? And what happens if, who knows what happens that would keep that from going forwards? And so that was my question of what's the time frame that would be required to actually complete this? And do we give out a contingent occupancy? I've never heard of such a thing.
Can we tie some kind of like bonding requirement to that, kind of completion of construction, the second phase of this?
David, we looked at the required improvements and bonding provisions in our bylaw. They don't generally list this sort of thing as some, bonding is typically for sidewalks and landscaping and erosion control measures and urban parks, things that we require that are generally a little bit ancillary to what the applicant wants to develop. I would say that the more that what is designed and proposed before the board is a unified site plan, the better level of comfort there is that all of the project will be built. So, when you see an integrated parking lot that's all going to be built at one time, when you see the access is feasible, when you see that the buildings are both designed at a level where they can be approved and built, when you see everything on one final plan coming through together, all the way to the point of does everything come in on one permit? Certainly we have people who do things where they take something all the way through permitting and then they only build part of what they get a permit for. That does happen. I would really not want to be in a position where there was some kind of conditional approval that said you can't open the doors on the grocery store until the apartments are ready for occupancy or something, because that would be a reach beyond what the town has ever done before, and frankly be almost impossible to enforce. I mean, I could try, but I don't think it would work.
So Matt, I have one last question on this for you, which is, are there any ambiguities in the code here that you think a legal opinion would be helpful if we ask for it? Given this conversation we've just had.
Do you think there's any ambiguities? Yeah. Unfortunately, I think there are a few. one is the way the 5 of 9 criteria is worded. It says, maybe achieved cumulatively across a single development proposal. Proposal's not a defined term. I would take it to mean an application, but it's not there. The question of whether the board could review the design of a residential building at the discretionary permit level prior to the needed growth management hearing to actually build that building. Essentially that my generalized question that I have to do a lot of explaining to the town attorney would be, can the board move forward? Can the board reasonably move forward with a discretionary permit review of this project with the criteria being proposed to be met as they are?
Maybe that's a question for the applicant to see if that's something they would be capable or interested in doing.
Repeat that question again. This is Jeff again.
Jeff, sorry, it's Scott. I guess I'm posing this to the chair. In reality, it's John, and maybe it's asking the applicant, if that is something that they can reasonably achieve by having a 3-story apartment building designed to such extent that it can get through DP at the same time as the grocery store.
Right. Meaning that is there sufficient time available to and the will to do such to go through that?
When you say design to the fullest extent, ready for construction, or?
No, I think what my understanding of that question is that it sufficient that we would be able to have a full review of that as a discretionary permit.
Yeah, I think it would have to be ready. It would have to be ready to go and meet all of the requirements so that staff could approve it, or at least run it through their approval process and get it ready for the approval and review by the board.
Right.
But wouldn't growth management dictate what the building looked like depending on the number of units?
Well, no, you're going to get the amount of units you want. It just may be spread over time.
Right.
But then you can't build a building all at once if you're spread over time.
Yeah, but I don't think that's what the question we're posing. It's more, do you have the building, say you want to build a 35 unit building, you'll get the units eventually. It just, again, maybe spread over time. You wouldn't build it until you had all of the units. But it would be, but you would design it to be approvable.
But earlier, somebody mentioned that, Scott, I think it was your project, Scott, that the 5 of 9 wasn't built all at once. But you're asking us to build the 5 of 9 all at once.
No, I'm actually not. I'm simply responding to Matt's comments.
Okay.
Jeff, all we're asking for is you to basically show that, hey, I'm ready to go if you guys are going to approve this. That's what we're asking for.
Yeah, so to show the design of the building and some more detail in terms of the dimensional requirements and utilities and whatnot.
That's materials, the hack comments. I assume the hack would.
So we'd have to go back to hack. Yeah.
But rather than just having a dotted line there saying future building, or say, hey, this is what the future building is going to look like when it's finally going to get approved with everything down the line.
Yeah.
Is it correct that it would essentially be the discretionary permit review without the growth management, that it would be a DP review with everything except growth management? Growth management would be allocated, and then I'm guessing it's probably going to be a formality to come back to the board to have the final approval granted once the growth management is allocated. Is that the sequencing on how this would go?
That would be
That's
my
how,
feeling.
that's how I'm understanding this right now. Whether that's legal or not, I have no clue.
Yeah,
me ask-
I do think that's accurate, Andy, and I think that, you know, we're balancing a couple different chapters in the bylaw. There are provisions that allow for discretionary permits to be for projects that have more than one phase and to allow projects to be split into phases. I think we can take what the board is expressing a desire for, i.e. a mostly designed residential component, and then identify it in that initial DP as phase 2, because it's got to have allocation. There is always going to be some level of uncertainty about all of a project building out as planned. And you know, I'm not pretending that there's a way we can offer the town 100% certainty on that with this one. I think the DRB is having a good conversation about how to achieve a level of certainty that gives them comfort moving forward with the next stage of review.
Yeah, he doesn't break ground until he's got it all. On that building. He builds the grocery store. He has the housing structure ready to go, and then he doesn't break ground on it until he's got however many units he needs to build.
Perhaps Matt covered this in a little bit of earlier discussion, but I guess I'll ask the question. If we go through that scenario where the next discretionary permit application comes in before form-based code becomes effective, not necessarily adopted, but effective, and the DRB reviews the design of that building, growth management is granted, and then the applicant comes back to get final approval for this residential building, would they have vested rights under the current bylaw, or would they be subject to form-based code at that future time, which may substantially change the appearance of the building?
I believe they could be vested under the current bylaw, but in my mind, as we have this conversation, I'm starting to write my request for legal opinion, pulling in a bunch of the bylaw citations. You know, there's a fact pattern here we're talking about that leads us to a couple of questions about the right procedure. You know, we didn't want to focus the staff report for tonight on that because it's a preliminary review of the site development. There's a lot to talk about design. But I think, you know, with maybe the DRB's agreement, I would like to ask if I could seek some legal advice, not wide open, hey, town lawyer, what do we do here? But rather, my theory is that there could be a phased discretionary permit review, as we've just talked about, and town attorney, based on the bylaw citations I'm giving you, is that an acceptable way forward that leads to a durable approval, which is, you know, a justifiable decision by the DRB. And I'm hearing from DRB members that they'd like to be on a little bit firmer ground with that when we go into that DP review.
I mean, not only that, Matt, I'm with Andy in that if this group as a DRB reviews that in this case, it's proposed as a residential building, and we give it our approval, that's, you know, essentially conditional on allocation being received, I'd like to think that a future DRB couldn't kind of pull that back when they came back in to kind of get it rubber stamped. We know boards change.
So being clear about exactly what an applicant is vested in would be important. Is that correct? Okay. Including being vested in a growth management allocation review process that exists today that might not exist in the same form under form-based code.
Jeez.
What a time to be alive.
So that growth management goes away with the proposed form-based code.
It doesn't entirely go away, but its administration is proposed to change. It's proposed to become essentially part of the permitting process with the same unit limits in place, same rules for using allocation and all of that. Oh, and I did want to mention, just because Jeff Nick said something about, you have to wait till you have it all. Remember that growth management was changed in 2019, 2020. And as long as you have a unit in the coming fiscal year, you can start your project and build through all of your allocated units without waiting for the valid year of each unit. So there's essentially a start date in growth management now for the overall project, and the units are spread out across the years. But if you build faster than that schedule, that is acceptable under the system now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me, but I don't think you were asking me.
I was asking Jeff, but we can go over it.
No, it does make sense. It does make sense, Matt. I don't know if you're asking me.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, one thought I have, maybe if you can phase this like you're talking about, that I think that makes sense. I mean, just to talk about this particular project for a second, it does fill a nice niche. The Aldi's model fills a nice niche in the supermarket market, or grocery market, I should say. One thought I had earlier in hearing this unfold is affordable housing. Is that exempt from growth management? And if this was an affordable unit, would that be another avenue to pursue?
Yes, if it was affordable at or below 80% of the area median income. DRB members will recall the recent Champlain Housing Trust hotel conversion project created 72 new residential units, but did not have to go to growth management due to the price restriction on those units.
And similar to Matt with senior housing too, right? Would be exempt.
Yeah, so senior housing, as it's been approved at Finney Crossing and in Blair Park, is approved under the healthcare and social assistance use category as opposed to residential. So that is not subjected to growth management either.
Good to know. Thanks.
All right. Board members, do you have any more questions on this subject, or should we move on to the kind of what we really like talking about?
On to something new.
Let's do that. So if we go right through the package here of the issues that Emily was speaking of, maybe
John, I had a couple of just random site plan questions.
Okay.
Do you want to wait till after? Do you want to go through the list first?
No, just shoot from the hip there, Dave.
All right. Can you reshare the site plan on the screen? Let's see. First off, so just south of the grocery store, there's a note of a new sidewalk and paved path. Is that intentional to have both of those right next to each other?
Yeah, I think the intent is to carry the paved path that exists along Wright Avenue, but to carry that hardscape from the paved path up to the edge of the grocery store, not only up to the planter that's proposed along that elevation, but also carry it all the way down to the entry at the southwest corner.
Yeah. Okay. And are you picturing asphalt and then concrete, kind of two different material types?
Yes.
Yeah. And then in the same area, I guess, right where the pointer is, to Emily's comment about that door, the entrance there coming right out of that, around that radius with cars coming in, that I would agree that's not ideal from a safety perspective. And just curious if you've thought of alternatives. And one alternative I thought, is it possible to shift the store to the north? And you've got, it seems like the loading area can shift up a little bit to the north. You would lose those 5 kind of parking spaces there. But can this be shifted to the north, or does the building have to does it have to be right along the frontage, or along the property line?
I'll let staff answer how far back it could be. There is a utility line along the north side of the building that would need to be relocated. So there is a bit of a of a pinch point there. The overhead utility line would need to be relocated with the building's current configuration. It'd have to be pushed even further to the north. It would be a limitation on how far the building could move.
Right, so our bylaw does require that new buildings come to the sidewalk, and parking and outdoor sales move to the side or rear. So they are compliant with having their entrance and their primary facade along Wright Avenue.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let
Yeah.
me- Emily and David, I'm sorry, Jeff, I don't just jump in here a little bit, but it's an interesting point to move the building north. Could you build, not have the actual building, but could you have planters or landscape designs or something that would qualify as a building, but could allow it to be slid further north?
Maybe like a patio or something, or some kind of
Yeah,
outdoor.
something that would quote unquote be defined as a part of the building,
Mhm.
a wing wall or something, some architectural component or, and Andy is, I'll ask Andy, there looks like there's room to slide it to the north, right?
Yeah, it would just mean, working with Green Mountain Power, that overhead line may have to be pulled back to the edge of the lease line between the bank and the
Mhm.
grocery store.
Yep.
So what
I
the
think
building line to sidewalk standard says is new buildings must come to the sidewalk. An exception of up to 30% of a building's frontage may be made for an entry plaza or courtyard. The DRB may also permit exceptions for accessible parking. So that this frontage here shifted back and then 30% is that plaza or courtyard, that would be approvable. And still having that main entrance where you can enter from the parking lot side or enter from the sidewalk.
I'm just gonna keep rolling. One question on the, it looks like is there a property line, that diagonal blue dash line that's kind of 2/3 of the way west on the parking lot? Are there two lots here?
Yes, there is. There are some old lot lines that are in there. The future building is shown on an existing Taft Corners Commercial Park lot. The grocery store is on the lot that the Northfield Savings Bank is part of.
And so would you be merging these lots as part of the application?
I think there'd be some merger, there'd be a lot of things going on because the lots would merge. You'd also be creating the right of way for Wright Avenue and Trader Lane.
Right.
There may be either a boundary line adjustment or an easement arrangement for the access into the garage on the future building to the north. There would certainly be some subdivision elements here, but I think it would be a number of things happening.
Got it. Related to the boundary line adjustment, the staff note said that garage access there'd need to be a boundary line adjustment to bring that access onto this lot. And I think I thought you mentioned, Andy, that you were just thinking of an easement across that parcel. Is it a requirement to have that access be entirely on this parcel, or can there just be an access easement across that property?
I'll let Emily answer that.
I would have to look into the bylaw a little bit more. I think typically in projects of this size and scale, we like to see everything contained within the subject property, and access easement might meet the bylaw requirement for safe legal access. That can be worked out discretionary permit.
David, that's that triangular shaped piece to the north is kind of an orphaned lot from the Trader Lane extension. So that could easily be merged into this overall site.
Got it. It's not tied to the bank lot. Yeah, I see.
No, it's not.
Yep. Okay. Last question, just in terms of the requirements to have that connection to the north, is there any wiggle room there, or is that a must there shall be a connection to the parcel to the north, no matter what.
There's some wiggle room. What the access chapter says is where there are no physical barriers, providing that point for future connection, whether it be constructed or the offer to the town to be able to connect through.
Okay, where there's no physical barriers. Okay.
Question, David, I'm glad David brought that up. All these would prefer not to create a shortcut, if you will, and have a traffic issue through their parking lot. Because dealer policy is eventually going to connect to Trader Lane, they will have another means of egress from their land. They wouldn't necessarily need a third egress across this lot, would they? I guess that's questions for Emily.
Right, what this current bylaw says now, that there be future access connected to future properties. On my staff report, I show 2 options. I don't think it has to be 2. I think 1 could probably meet the intent of the bylaw. For access.
You're saying 1, Emily, but Jeff is asking if 0 is okay, right?
Right.
I don't know if 0 would be okay. Let me pull up chapter 13 for the quotation. So what chapter 13 says is, development should have safe functional connections with adjoining developments for vehicles, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Interconnected street and trail systems, shared points of access, and shared parking will be required wherever they are not precluded by physical barriers, including property ownership, historic land use patterns, and difficult terrain. So thinking back to Matt's analogy earlier about looking at the overall subdivision approval for, multi-phase residential development, you look for where does this property abut others and where could that access be provided in the future. It's not requiring that it be built today, but that the legal connection be there for the future.
So Emily, I'm suggesting that if we include that triangular shaped piece of land to the north of the apartment building, and that becomes part of this overall lot, then that would be the second connection to Trader Lane, because it's all going to be owned by the same property owner, Taft Corners Associates. So that would meet the definition of the requirement, right? Right now, they only have one means of access to Route 2A. They don't have dealer policy doesn't have an access to Trader Lane. But they could in the future across this triangular shaped piece of land.
Yeah, it's weird because it's, the garage access. So I don't know if that would meet the intent here.
Is the intent to provide additional access points for the dealer lot or for the subject parcel?
Both. The intent here is to create an interconnected grid of streets.
To avoid that frustrating trip where you go to the grocery store, then you would go to the bank and you have to go all the way out onto 2A to get to the bank, right?
Right.
Just to allow
So I
those.
guess what I'm envisioning here on this site plan, the recommendations about the parking lot circulation, if where this access drive is currently proposed becomes a rank of parking, this access gets shifted down, then you no longer have a drive aisle like right in front of the building where all the people are going to walk. If that ever connects through to the dealer policy property, it would function like a secondary street, and then reorienting the parking to provide better pedestrian flow through. I think it would be feasible to have that access point available in the future where dealer policy then connects through and this parking lot drive aisle in the future becomes a grid street.
But these connections wouldn't necessarily need to be streets. They can simply be connections between parking lots, right?
Right, they could be connections through parking lots, and they could be, you provide the offer to the town for that right of way. But it doesn't need to be constructed today, just that the safe legal access is there to create that connection between these two abutting properties.
I guess that's what I'm wondering though, is I think you're suggesting that there needs to be an offer to the town for a public right-of-way and a public street connection. I'm wondering, does there simply need to be, sort of as South Burlington does it, you build your parking lot to the property line. When the other guy gets around to it, he builds his parking lot to the property line and there's connectivity, not a defined street, or certainly a right-of-way to the town, which would have,
Yeah,
right of way.
I think that would work because 13.7 does say shared parking as well, shared points of access, interconnected streets. So I think that model could work as well.
I mean, in that case, then anywhere along that northern, is that north on the top, or is that's actually what, east?
Yeah, the top is the north.
It's the north, okay. So anywhere along there, you could potentially put a connection through in the future, if there was something to connect to.
My understanding when writing the staff report was that the bank and the future grocery store were separate parcels. So I think there's an opportunity as well, if it is a land lease where that access point is, associated with the bank parking lot. It doesn't necessarily need to be to the west of the grocery store. It could be to the east, near the bank. So I think there's a couple options if it is still one contiguous property under the same ownership that's being reviewed tonight.
So Emily, if this is a definite requirement, the option would be, because it's hard to go to the bank, they've got that ground lease. Be hard to tell them to share their parking lot with somebody, but with the supermarket, it's a new project. You could create that easement on the western end of that parking lot. Seems like a logical place, maybe furthest from the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somewhere there.
There's a couple options here, whether it's given to the town or the shared parking between two abutting properties to provide that interconnected vehicular and pedestrian flow.
So, Emily, is that something that we would want to see built right now, a little hammerhead or something that went back to the property line, so that the next time the property to the north comes up for approval for something, we can require them to connect to that, instead of still having a gap on this plot because it's not up for approval right now?
It could be built to the property line. I think shown on the plat is acceptable as well. You think about large subdivision design where they're platting that easement or right of way to the property line.
Right, I'm just trying to think of compelling someone to actually build it. I mean, when would we be able to do that in the future if it's not built now as part of this project?
That's a good point.
I know from talking to dealer policy that they would like it. We've resisted it, but now it looks like it's a requirement. So as long as it's going to be the least impactful for all these, then I guess if dealer policy wants it, then I would imagine they would build it.
Right. Well, you've heard this mentioned already tonight, and I think we'll be saying it before we're finished. The board here doesn't necessarily like to do all the designing, but I think you're hearing us say that we would like to see that connection be a possible thing in the future if the neighboring property wants to do it. And the discretionary permit, we're going to want to see where that location would be from your side of the property line.
Understood.
All right. David, anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Well, that was a great start because that was one of the very first items as we start to page through our report from Emily here to begin with. I think that was under the dimensional standards, right? To discuss parking. So I'm not sure, Emily, what you mean by numerical setback from Route 2 and 2A. What's a
Right,
numerical
so-
setback?
A hard number, so 25 feet or 55 feet,
I
buildings
see.
and parking need to be set back from Route 2 or 2A. The bylaw is vague. It wants buildings pulled to the sidewalk on side streets like Wright Ave,
Mhm.
but it wants parking to the side or rear.
I see. And the hack has suggested or has recommended increasing the building frontage on Wright Avenue. Are they talking about the grocery store? Or
They were thinking about the future building.
the future building? I see. And Jeff, you mentioned there that you felt that was a piece that you objected to right off. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know how you fit it on there and get that pocket park in there.
Yeah, I don't
And-
either. I mean, this building is already shown to be along most of the entire length of Trader Lane. Is that right? But for the pocket park, which it looks like you've oriented in such a way as to try to maximize the Adirondack views.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you. Anybody on the DRB want to comment on that further or disagree with the near conclusion we just came to?
No.
Outdoor storage, I don't think there's, we talked about that. I think you'll need to address that during the, at the DP plans. You know, so how you're dealing with all the outdoor waste and whatnot. Adirondack views. I think we just went over that.
Okay. Where are you reading from, John?
I'm at 41.9 on page 3. I'm sorry. I'm going through the staff report here. Maybe we can put that up on the screen. So we just discussed site layout, how can be improved to use Adirondack views, especially in the urban park. Well, you've put the urban park, it seems to me, where it's going to best be able to take advantage of those views. I think, you know, when you get into the design of the apartment or the residential building, there may be some public spaces in there that can take advantage of these views, but there's probably going to be limited public spaces in that building.
Right.
And that's something that I suppose we would look at DP when it came up, just to make sure you've done as much as you can do reasonably. I'm going to go through this, and if anybody has a comment, just blurt it right out and stop me. Development patterns. We're talking about building mass must be broken up using clearly demarked doors and windows, including display windows, variations in the building footprint. I think that is Emily, from the hack standpoint, are they satisfied with this or? Or is-
Overall, yes, they had one discussion point for the DRB, recommendation number 4A, about the stone veneer base.
All right, I guess this seems like as good a spot as any to get into the hack comments then. I'm going to weigh in on this one first. I have no idea why the hack is worried about this. this building is designed to comply or to be acceptable or not. Why is the hack deciding which materials go where?
Primarily, the hack was concerned about that there's, two languages on the building. Some places where the stone base is shown beneath the brown veneer, and they're fine with that. But then where it's shown below the brick and places where it's not, particularly the southeast corner facing Wright Ave, there would be stone veneer below the brown, then all brick. And then the east elevation, you would have that stone veneer below brick. So there's a spot where it would be disjointed between the south and the east facades.
South and the east.
Yeah, so the hack is saying either provide stone veneer along all of the brick or take away the stone veneer on the east side below the brick. Just match the three sides.
To balance the building.
So
Right.
that's the hack's opinion of balance or symmetry,
Right.
as opposed to the design architects.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody have any more questions? Do we want to discuss this in during deliberations? Anybody else, everybody understand what's at play here?
Doesn't matter to me either way.
Yeah. So Emily, where do I find the rest of the hack comments that we may want to discuss, or their recommendations?
Recommendations number 4, starting on page 11.
All right. So they're talking about requiring building materials and specifications, 3D renderings from Wright Avenue. Okay, that seems reasonable. Forms should follow function. Windows on the west elevation above the canopy should either be real windows or not windows. All right. So Jeff, I guess these are all things that the board's going to have to consider during deliberations. Is there anything here that that you take objections to?
No, not really. They're happy to comply, and I think that they don't want to, yeah, I think they're happy to comply, and whatever you come back with, I'm sure they'll be in agreement with.
They're willing to do?
Yeah, I haven't heard any objection, although possible enclosure. There was one item here.
Number 4D was the provide enclosure, consider reorienting the building and park so the park is enclosed on 2 sides by the building. That was kind of related to their recommendation about the more frontage on Wright Ave.
Mm-hmm.
And the pedestrian connection, I guess, provide a pathway through the parking lot. That, not sure exactly, Emily, what that means. I mean,
Right, I think that would be something like healthy living or the walkway between Walmart and Home Depot where there's a protected path for pedestrians. So if you're going from one side of the lot to the other, you don't have to do it entirely through the drive aisle.
and how would that be? How would that be done? If going from,
Right, so what the bylaw requires is that there be pedestrian access through and around a parking lot. Andy Rowe worked on this one for the healthy living building, so I think he can probably problem solve something to get the drive aisle away from the main entrance, create a pedestrian path through, whether that's shifting the angle or which way the drive aisles orient. I think there's a creative solution there.
Emily, it seems like at Healthy Living that walkway seems very successful in that it connects the public sidewalk along the road to the front entrance of the building. And so I think the concept here is great. I'm wondering on this site what we're connecting. I guess we're connecting the future residential building. You'd be able to walk through this parking lot potentially on that sidewalk up to the front door of the building. But but the public way, the sidewalks are here along Wright Avenue, and that's what you really want to have a connection with. So I'm not sure what the purpose of that sidewalk in the parking lot is for, other than the people who are parked in the parking lot.
What the parking chapter says is how must pedestrian access around, through, and to parking areas be provided? There shall be safe pedestrian access in the form of sidewalks around all parking and loading areas. The DRB may permit the use of the recreation path or other pedestrian ways as an alternative. Accessible routes must be provided from parking areas to the buildings of the destinations they serve. And through, the DRB will require that safe pedestrian access be provided through large parking areas.
Okay. Does it define large parking area?
Nope.
All right, there's a Achilles heel. I mean, I look at this and I wonder whether it makes more sense to provide, those islands at the west end of the site, path there from those parking spots if you didn't feel comfortable walking through the drive aisles to get down to the sidewalk. But anyway.
Right. I think the way the hack recommendations are worded here is that it gives the applicant some flexibility in how they provide that pathway, how they reduce those vehicle pedestrian conflicts.
I think that's a great way of putting this, is that the DP, we'd like to see how those conflicts have been minimized.
Okay.
I mean, I take exception to a couple of these. I wonder why the hack is telling the applicant here that the size of the overhangs on the building and whether they need to be symmetrical or not. But if the applicant has no objections, then I'm not going to adjust those.
John, as always, it is advisory, not compulsory.
Yes. Well, we'll talk about what we want to say then in deliberation.
Frank Lloyd Wright would not build a building with the Williston hack around.
It wouldn't be the same building.
I think we would like to stick as closely as possible to what Aldi's has proposed for the building. I mean, in terms of the angles they've put on the roof line, certainly we're willing to hide the mechanical equipment. That should go without saying, but in terms of the other angles and, overhangs, they'd like to stick as closely as possible what they've shown. We're happy to add the overhang above the e-commerce store that faces west. That's agreeable, certainly.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So we have, I think we've talked about the 5 of 9 plenty this evening. Did anyone else have any comments on the hack recommendations?
Not on the hack, but on the 5 of 9.
Yes.
One of the things is it possible to build the park while you're building the grocery store and parking lot? I know it would probably be a little bit in the way of it, but.
I mean, it's certainly possible. It might get in the way of building the future building if we're right up against it. it may even tie into the future building. But we'll take a look at it. If that's what you come back with.
Well, the other issue is the urban park with art is not fully defined until the other building's built. I mean, that could just basically be a couple of benches and a sculpture stuffed in the dirt, and that would qualify until they build the other building and they put the finished product in.
Possibly. I mean, Jeff, I can speak for myself here that, you know, I'm hoping to see at DP for the grocery store, you know, a good faith effort here that that you're moving ahead with the rest of the project with all due speed, and that as approvals would be available and you're able to do it, that you would be doing that in a timely fashion.
Absolutely. No, and actually we've already been approached by an apartment developer that wanted to buy it from us. So
right.
There's
right. And with
no
what
reason
Matt, right. And with what Matt was saying earlier about, you know, what would be involved with the, you know, looking at this at a DP level, I think that certainly would demonstrate your seriousness about moving ahead with this as soon as you can. It in my mind, for kind of a common sense standpoint, that seems to make a lot of sense based on the conversations we've had here tonight.
Yeah, understood.
Obviously, the board will be discussing this as we move forward here, as we move later into the night. You know, we'll try to write it down here in a way that you can understand what we're looking for.
Yep.
Anything else on the 5 of 9? We've divested rights, non-conforming lots, blah, et cetera. I think we exhausted that one pretty good, huh? Growth management, we talked about that. Bicycles and pedestrian access. We talked about how you might be able to adjust the parking lot to better comply with the intentions of the bylaw.
I guess
Parking.
staff was suggesting that a rank of parking be placed up against the building. That's an issue, I think, for the tenant. I think the applicants talked about, you know, restricting that the easterly curb cut to be enter only or potentially exit only. Works much better being an entrance only for deliveries. I guess we'd be looking for some feedback from the DRB if there's a strong preference one way or the other. We've also talked about some aisle and angled parking scenarios as well.
Yeah, definitely the supermarket would prefer not to have a bank of or a line of parking against the building, or that they prefer not to have that. But as Andy said, entrance only, they're willing to think about that one.
Okay. We've got, we talked about connectivity, parking, bicycle parking, that's all needs to be in compliance. What else is on here? That anybody have any comments on any of these items?
John, just going back, just a quick question on the traffic study. Andy, do you have a sense of whether you would look at this assuming that Trader Lane was fully open to traffic, or would you assume that this was a dead end right avenue?
I think again, while the landowner has been talking with the town, I'm not sure what the build out for Trader Lane would be. Obviously, Trader Lane would open up a lot more opportunities for the distribution of trips from this particular site, but it would also bring a lot of background traffic with it.
Right.
It seems like we would probably need to look at this with just access via Merchants Row and Wright Avenue initially, unless the board thinks otherwise.
That feels reasonable to me.
All right. So as I preview the rest of the items in here, it looks like very standard stuff. I don't see anything there that I think we need to belabor too long unless somebody has a question or a comment to make on the rest of the staff report. So I guess I will open it up now to anybody in the audience that has a question of the applicant here or has a comment to make. If Pete says to raise your Zoom hand.
No chats and no raised hands.
No chats, no raised hands. So board members, any other questions here that we haven't taken care of?
None for me,
Jeff,
John.
Jeff, Andy, anything out there from you guys? Any last comments?
No, I think we're good. I think I'll probably follow up with staff maybe and talk about some of the issues we talked about earlier in terms of the phasing and how we accomplish all of that.
Yeah, well, we're very grateful for you bringing up stuff here that we've never had to deal with before.
Happy to be of service.
All right. So I think I think that's good. So I'm going to close this at 9:32 p.m. and I'm going to hand the gavel back to our chair, Mr. Kelly.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks, John. That was a heavy lift. I appreciate it. Okay. Next order of business is, before we go into deliberations, we've gonna staff actually, do we go into deliberation, and when we come out of deliberation, do we do agenda item number 3, or do we do agenda item number 3 now?
I think we should do it now. I believe Brian Courier here is for the Trinity discussion.
Okay. My preference is to do it now anyway, so, okay. So now we're gonna segue into agenda item number 3. First, under that heading is DP 22-01 Trinity Baptist Church, review of legal opinion. Brian, sorry to disappoint you, but this is simply just to acknowledge that we received the legal opinion, and that the legal opinion will be considered at DP when that is filed. Other than that, I've got nothing further to add. Do you have anything, Brian, that you would like to raise at this point before we transition to the next topic?
Nope, we're all set.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry you had to wait all evening for that.
No worries. Zoom makes it not that big a deal anymore. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, next up is final plan review for DP 09-01.23, which is building H in Finney Crossing.
That's something I need to recuse myself on.
That was where I was going. Okay, Scott, so you're recused in this discussion. So I would like staff to take control of this, please. I did not have drawings in my packet. And so we, the DRB, retained final plan approval, and walk us through what has been proposed, so that when we go into deliberations, we can have a discussion about it.
Right, so the DRB retained final plan review primarily because of the discussion about the urban park and condition number 21. Final plan shall include revisions to the park to add elements that activate the central area and provide a defining feature of Finney Crossing. What the applicant is proposing to do is split final plans into two and do two separate permits, one for the restaurant, one for the urban park. We are recommending that you approve the final plans for the restaurant as submitted. We did upload them and link them online. Staff has reviewed them and finds that the building and its appurtenances, the landscaping along the walkway, the parking, the landscaping along Holland Lane, that is all in compliance with the DRB's conditions of approval. At a later date, they'll come in and submit final plans for the urban park, including the element for the activated central area, and that will be a more detailed discussion for the DRB. What we're asking tonight is that you make a vote for staff to approve the final plans as submitted.
Okay,
For the restaurant.
let's do that. Let's do that right now. So is there a motion to approve the restaurant final plans as submitted?
I'll make a motion to approve the final plans as submitted for the restaurant.
Second,
Okay, is there any discussion?
no,
David, did you have something you were gonna say?
I did, yeah. Can you explain how this is different than the application we were just talking about, where, so we're gonna approve this restaurant, they can build it. How do we have assurances that they're gonna come and build the park?
Right, so the development agreement will need to include all the required improvements that were part of the discretionary permit application. The senior living building still needs to finish its permitting final plans process. And I believe there's one more building in Finney Crossing Building A that can go through. So the same way that throughout Finney Crossing's permitting history, it's been anticipated that this urban park would happen, and other buildings were getting their permits and certificate of compliance. It's going to come down to, those final few buildings that the urban park will need to be built before Finney Crossing gets its final certificate of compliance.
So we still have some leverage to use, I guess, is what.
Well,
Right, we still have some leverage, and we're aware that the applicant is working on those urban park design elements.
And so I'd like to just chime in here and remind people that our concern and why we retained final approval wasn't with the restaurant, it was with the urban park.
Mhm.
And so, but your point is well taken, David Saladino. Did that satisfy your question?
It did, yeah, thanks.
Okay, any other discussion?
yes, I mean, I was going to make the same point, but probably stronger. In that, I felt very strongly before about that park. And I fear that we're giving up too much leverage. At some point, if everything else gets approved and we still are arguing over what that park wants to be, what's our leverage? This was put in as a single application, and we reviewed it as a single application, and now we're dividing it in two. I have a hard time with that. I mean, at what point can we continue? I mean, if you take it, if you exaggerate the thing, you get to a point where there's one element on a site that somebody doesn't like or doesn't want to comply with, and they get down to that, they've got everything else done, and then that thing, you just argue about it forever because nobody cares. I mean, I think David is right that we have to be careful we don't give up too much leverage here. This is our bite at the apple. This is our strongest bite, is to get a park that we're all happy with. And, you know, that's my point. And I, for one, will be voting to not move ahead or not to approve these final plans. I want to see all the plans together.
Okay, roger that. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. So there's a motion that has been made. It's been seconded to approve the restaurant only plans. And I'll do individual roll calls on this. Paul Christensen, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Hamelgarn,
Nay.
Scott Riley is recused. David Saladino,
Yay.
David Turner,
Yay.
and the chair is a yay. 4 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention. Motion carries. Okay. Next up is the appeal of certificate of compliance. We've dealt with that out of sequence, so that one's done. Okay, we are now ready to go into deliberative session. We will go into deliberative session at 9:41. Okay, welcome back to the Williston Development Review Board for Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. It's 10:30. We are out of deliberative session. Is there a motion for DP 22-04?
Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, John Hamelgarn, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of January 11th, 2022, accept the recommendations for DP 22-04 and authorize this application to move forward to discretionary permit review.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Hearing none. Paul Christensen, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Hamelgarn,
Yay.
Scott Riley,
Yay.
Dave Saladino,
Yay.
Dave Turner,
Yay.
and Pete Kelly is a yay. All in favor, none opposed, motion carries. Is there a motion for DP 21-20, Taft Corners Associates?
Yes. As authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, David Turner, move the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of town staff and advisory boards required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of January 11th, 2022, accept the recommendations of DP 2120. This approval authorizes the residential portion to move. Should that say residential portion?
Yes.
It should, okay. This approval authorizes the residential portion to move forward to growth management and the grocery store to move forward to discretionary permit review with the following changes. Okay, under recommendations in motion, item B will be changed to incorporate grade change and retaining wall foundation in the urban park and public art elements to create a sheltered and comfortable space. Recommendation C 41.7.12, provide a plaza and courtyard near the main entrance, open up the southwest corner to, I can't see make it a place welcoming from Wright Avenue, not just welcoming from the parking lot. The pictures are going over over the text for some reason. Let me see if I can move them. There we go. Okay. And then item 2, item C shall be consider shifting the curb cuts to the west on Wright Avenue and create a ranking parking between, I'm sorry, I lost my spot. Ranking parking between the building entrance and parking drive aisle to improve pedestrian and vehicle circulation and reduce potential conflict points. Consider alternatives such as reconfigured parking lot with a ranking parking between the entrance and drive aisles, one-way movement through the parking lot, raised pedestrian crossings with textured protected pedestrian walkways through parking lots, etc. Item D, WDB 14, pedestrian safety and accessible parking and circulation in compliance with WDB 14.3.3 and 14.7.3. The discretionary permit must include cohesive parking lot shared between the grocery store and future buildings. Bicycle parking. Okay. Bicycle parking and. All right, we're good. Go on. You can
He's
go on.
messing with you.
All right, is it gonna move?
No.
Bicycle parking and end of the trip facilities must be identified for the grocery store, apartment building, and urban park. Compact car spaces strongly encouraged to reduce surface area of parking lot. Next. Under item 4, we'll strike item A.
That's it.
That's it.
So I want to go back to the question you had about whether it should say residential or not in the motion.
Yes.
I'm wondering
Yeah.
whether we should be saying, given the conversation we had tonight, this approval authorizes the residential portion to move forward to growth management and discretionary permit review.
I don't know if we have to overthink that one. What the bylaw just says is for
Agreed.
projects to go to growth management, they need to be authorized at pre-app.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, John Hamilgard seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Yay or nay? Paul?
Yay.
John Hamilgard?
Yay.
Scott Riley?
Yay.
Dave Saladino?
Yay.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
And I recuse myself. So that's 5 in favor, none opposed, 1 recusal. Motion carries. Okay, next up is the meeting minutes of December 14th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Scott Riley makes a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds it. Any discussion?
Nice job, whoever wrote that up. It's a lot of work. There's a lot in there. Anyway, I did look at them.
Paul Christensen, yay or nay?
Yay.
John Hamilgarn,
Yay.
Scott Riley,
Yay.
Dave Saladino,
Yay.
Dave Turner.
Yay.
Chair is a yay, 6 in favor, none opposed. Minutes are approved. Is there any other business to bring forth at this time?
No.
I have a question for Matt. He's still there?
Yes.
I sent you an email the other day. What's the progress of getting us another member?
So I did check in with the town manager on that, and they are scheduling, I believe, interviews for 2 possible candidates coming up in the next 1 or 2 select board meetings.
Right. I didn't see it on any of their agendas.
it being budget season, it's been slow getting it there.
Yeah, well, we have enough recusals on this board that it can be a little frustrating.
Yeah, we do.
Yep.
I mean, when we have to, when there's only 4 of us left, it unfortunately, though it shouldn't, it does change the complexion of the decision-making process. So anyway, as fast as they could do it, it would be great.
Okay,
Pass that on.
anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
So be it.
adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Aye.